Maybe I'm not supposed to enjoy this too much, but what can I do? Torah is enjoyable, very pleasurable. We're looking at the Rambam, Perek Aleph, Halacha Zayin, and we're trying to figure out, number one, whether or not the father has to pay tuition for the Torah Shebaal Peh of his son. In the case of Torah Shebechsav, it's absolutely crystal clear that the father is obligated to pay, and the Malamed, who's teaching Torah Shebechsav, is permitted to take money for his work in teaching Torah Shebechsav. But in Torah Shebaal Peh, it's a whole different story. Now, with regard to the Rambam, in the case of Torah Shebechsav, he opens up by telling us that there was a tradition in certain locations to pay the Malamed Tinokos Schar. And the Rambam repeats himself a second time, just a few words later. Makom shenogu l'lamed Torah shebechsav b'schar, mutar lamed b'schar. That's a little bit odd. The Rambam is not repetitive as a general rule. And then the Rambam says, "Aval Torah shebaal peh osur l'lamda b'schar." And the Rambam seems to be very outspoken about this, that you're not allowed to be paid for the study of Torah shebaal peh. And the Rambam goes on to say, "Shenemar." And in the past, we've mentioned and emphasized that whenever the Rambam says "Shenemar," he means to derive a halacha d'oraisa from the Torah itself. So we're going to see exactly how the Rambam achieves that goal. But one of the issues that we have to address is that it would seem from the Rambam that the father's obligation to teach his son Torah is limited to Torah Shebechsav. And that's a very difficult premise. The Kesef Mishnah actually derives this from the Rambam, that a father has no obligation whatsoever to teach his son Torah Shebaal Peh, even bechinam, even without having to pay tuition. And the Mefarshei Rambam are up in arms here. What do you mean? The father's obligation is not to teach his son Torah Shebaal Peh. At least grant me that he has to teach his son bechina, meaning without paying. But if he has someone who's willing to teach his son Torah Shebaal Peh, he should certainly be obligated to, employ that person, so to speak, to teach Torah Shebaal Peh. But leaving the Kesef Mishnah on the side, it's quite possible that the Rambam would agree that the father's obligation extends beyond Torah Shebechsav, but not b'schar, meaning up to the point where he can pay a Malamed, which is Torah Shebechsav, then he's obligated to pay a Malamed. If he has to hire a Malamed, he'll hire a Malamed. When we get to Torah Shebaal Peh, for sure the father is obligated to teach his son Torah Shebaal Peh, but he doesn't have to pay schar because the Torah doesn't allow the Malamed to take schar. And then the Rambam goes on to discuss a case called Lo Matzah Mishi Alamdo Bechinam. There's no one available to teach Torah Shebaal Peh gratis without getting paid for it. And therefore the Rambam says Yolamdo B'schar. He's going to have to pay because there's no other option. There's not one single person who's willing to come forward and offer to teach his son gratis bechina. Now the question arises, okay, so the father is in a desperate situation. He has no one to teach his son Torah Sheba'al Peh. And anyone who's a potential teacher of Torah Sheba'al Peh is demanding payment. And the Rambam says he has to pay him. How does Rambam know this? Shenemar, he quotes a pasuk in Mishlei, which is very interesting that from Mishlei we could derive a doraisa halacha, and that is emes kneh. Emes is referring to the Torah. Kneh means you have to acquire it, and acquire it means financially pay for it. Just like if you wanted to buy meat in the market, you'd have to pay for it. So too, if you want to get Torah for your son and no one's there to offer to pay to teach your son Torah gratis, then you'll have to pay for it. Emes kneh. But how does that help me for the Malamed himself? Because the Rambam has just finished telling us that Torah Sheba'al Peh asul l'lamda b'schar. You're not allowed to teach Torah Sheba'al Peh b'schar. So I understand the situation of the father. He's desperate. He can't find one person. He tried every WhatsApp group in the world, and no one is there offering and volunteering to teach the son Torah b'chinam. So he's desperate to fulfill his obligation to guarantee that his son learns Torah Sheba'al Peh. He'll have to pay for it, emes kneh. But I don't understand how that exonerates, if I could use that word, the Malamed who's now going to get paid for teaching Torah Sheba'al Peh when the Rambam says Torah Sheba'al Peh also l'lamda b'schar. Now, how does the Rambam derive the conclusion that with regard to Torah Sheba'al Peh, you don't take money for teaching Torah Sheba'al Peh? The Rambam says, Shenemar, right, this is towards the beginning of Sefer Dvarim, Re'ei limadati eschem chukim mishpatim kasher tzivani Hashem. Now let's look at that pasuk carefully. Re'ei, now the opening introductory word Re'ei seems to indicate, this is like halachically significant. Take note of this. And then limadati eschem means that Moshe Rabbeinu taught the Torah to Klal Yisrael. Chukim u'mishpatim. Now, which Torah are we talking about? Chukim mishpatim. Chukim mishpatim is a reference to Torah Sheba'al Peh, not to Torah Shebechsar. So Moshe Rabbeinu says, check me out. I taught Klal Yisrael Torah Sheba'al Peh b'chinam. No one paid me for it. And then the pasuk says, Kasher tzivani Hashem, which sounds like the pasuk is telling us through the mouth of Moshe Rabbeinu that Moshe had a command from on high that he should teach the Torah to Klal Yisrael b'chinam without getting paid. In other words, Kasher tzivani Hashem means I was fulfilling God's will. And I think maybe that the Rambam is trying lafuke here by quoting this pasuk Kasher tzivani Hashem. Don't think that Moshe Rabbeinu's chasidus, he was so pious that Moshe Rabbeinu went above the law, lifnim mishus hadin, and although he really deserved to be paid, he was mevater on the payment. No. It's Kasher tzivani Hashem. This is the tzivah they got from Hashem to pass on the Torah, to transmit the Torah to you, Klal Yisrael, b'chinam, without getting paid. Okay then? Without getting paid. Ma ani b'chinam lamadati. Now the word lamadati comes. What does lamadati mean? Lamadati means I learned. Interesting. The Rambam is now shifting the focal point here from Moshe Rabbeinu transmitting the Torah, the Mesiras HaTorah of Moshe Rabbeinu, and now he's asking, how was the Torah transmitted to him, meaning to Moshe Rabbeinu? How did Moshe Rabbeinu receive the Torah? And the answer is lamadati b'chinam. Does that make any sense to anybody? Bechinam lamadati, what does that mean? Lamadati. Lamadati means I studied, meaning I received the Torah. What does bechinam mean? Now, I was always wondering if you wrote a check to the Ribono Shalom, in which bank would he cash the check? If he's going to cash it in TD Bank at Wilson, then he's going to have to take a plane to Canada because they won't even talk to him on the phone. This I know, personal experience. Anyway, so what does it mean? Bechinam lamadati. I study the Torah bechinam. The flip side of bechinam is beschar. It's not shaykh to pay HaKadosh Baruch Hu. I don't know. I don't even know where the check would be deposited. I mean, there is something called hegdesh. You could transfer money to hegdesh, but a hegdesh is an entity unto itself. It's a monetary entity. So it seems to me, Rabbosai, you'll have to judge this, that ani bechinam lamadati is a gilui milsa, meaning it sheds a light on how to understand the pasuk kasher tzivani Hashem. And now kasher tzivani Hashem takes on a new meaning. It means that to the same extent that God passed on the Torah to me, says Moshe Rabbeinu, bechinam, so too kasher tzivani, I will now pass on the Torah to Klal Yisrael. So let's read it inside.
No, nobody says li madati. The ksiv is li madati.
No, I tell you why it doesn't work, Bobby, because
in other words, Hashem is saying that li madati means I taught.
No, but the word ani is referring to Moshe Rabbeinu. Take a look. Ma ani.
Li madati, in other words, HaKadosh Baruch Hu taught me the Torah bechinam.
Correct. I studied the Torah, or I received the Torah. God taught me the Torah bechinam. I'm just wondering what that means. Bechinam. Bechinam means, God could have sent me a bill, says Moshe Rabbeinu, but he didn't send me a bill.
We make that drasha all the time with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Chesed. What does it mean, chesed for Hashem? It's like, obviously we have some recognition that we can give something to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, even though it doesn't really make sense.
Well, what do you mean we give to HaKadosh Baruch Hu? God gives us chesed. We don't bestow chesed.
No, but right, God gives us chesed, and He does it. We say that He gives it the chesed bechinam, like He did this kindness to us for no reason.
No, so, I think, Bobby, the word bechinam in your context is referring to the fact that al pi midas hadin, we didn't deserve the chesed. We didn't do enough to deserve it. But right. Here the word bechinam means payment, literally money.
Yeah, okay, but I hear, but you can go that way also. In other words, that we do have that we're paying a HaKadosh Baruch Hu for things. We're so in other words, the fact that you can't really understand what that means. How is a HaKadosh Baruch Hu going to accept money? But the fact is that He taught us the Torah for nothing. There was no schar.
Right. So maybe we're both saying the same thing. I call this a gili milsa. What do I mean? We're not going to learn any halachos from the fact that Moshe Rabbeinu didn't get a bill from Hashem for receiving the Torah from Hashem. That's not so. Obviously, Moshe Rabbeinu didn't get a bill. God doesn't give a bill. He doesn't expect payment. But it's a gili milsa. What do I mean by gili milsa? In the same way that Moshe Rabbeinu received the Torah bechinam, and it couldn't have been otherwise, that's the exact same way that he passed on the Torah to the people of Israel, where it could have been otherwise.
Yeah.
And that's the way I think the Rambam is learning the pasuk Kasher Tzivani Hashem. What does it mean Kasher Tzivani? in the same way that God gave me the Torah, I'm commanded to give you the Torah. And just like in the case where God gave me the Torah, obviously there was no payment involved. So too, I have to do kasher tzivani as I receive the Torah, and I have to pass on the Torah bechina. And that's what the Rambam says. If you look at his language, he says, Ma ani bechinam lamadati, I studied Torah without paying for it. Afatem lamadatem bechinam imeni, you too received the Torah bechinam. I didn't charge you for it. You could have paid me, but I didn't ask for any money. And we have to add kasher tzivani Hashem because this is not a chasidus on the part of Moshe Rabbeinu, but rather Moshe Rabbeinu is telling me a halacha l'doros. That's why the pasuk opens up with the word re'eh, and that's what it means kasher tzivani, that God commanded me to repeat and imitate that Mesiras HaTorah, that Moshe received the Torah, God gave him the Torah, repeat that for Klal Yisrael. So I taught you b'chinam, limadati eschem bechukim mishpatim b'chinam, kasher tzivani Hashem, the way that I received Torah from Hashem. And that's a kasher tzivani because it's not a matter of chasidus of Moshe Rabbeinu. Moshe Rabbeinu is not going beyond the letter of the law. He's doing exactly what the law requires him because he was mandated kasher tzivani by Hashem to pass on the Torah in the same way that he received the Torah. And since the way he received the Torah, the tzura, the ofen, the way he received the Torah of Kabbalah Torah, Moshe was b'chinam, so too his Mesira to Klal Yisrael's b'chinam, and now Klal Yisrael receives the Torah b'chinam. And now we get to the punchline. V'chein kishetelamdu l'doros. Now it's your opportunity, your chance to teach Torah to others. Lamdu b'chinam. The same way, Kemoshe lamadati mimeni, just like you received the Torah from me, b'chinam, says Moshe Rabbeinu, so too you have to pass on the Torah b'chinam, and you will not get paid for passing on the Torah. And all this refers to chukim mishpatim. Chukim mishpatim means Torah Shebal Peh. So whereas in Torah Shebachsav, you're allowed to take money for teaching Torah Shebachsav, hence the father is obligated to hire a malamed to teach his son Torah Shebachsav, but that's Torah Shebachsav. But when it comes to Torah Shebal Peh, the Rambam says, no, the same way that God gave me the Torah without any payment, that's the way I passed on the Torah to you without any payment, and that's the way you're going to pass on the Torah to others without any payment, and therefore when you're teaching Torah Shebal Peh, you will not get paid. Now, Rabosa, I'm not getting into another sugya over here. We have to go through the sugya Nedarim about, schar bittul, and I told you many times that the Rambam doesn't, at least here in Hilchos Talmud Torah, that's what we have in front of us, he doesn't talk about schar bittul, schar batol. That's not his issue. He's not addressing that. He's addressing the din d'oraisa that says you cannot be paid. You want to come up with some sort of a loophole in the halacha, and say, well, I wasn't really paying for teaching Torah. I was paid to be a kindergarten, supervisor and so forth. That's a different issue. But to accept payment for the teaching of Torah Shebal Peh, that, says the Rambam, is unacceptable. And why is it unacceptable? Again, I go through the pasuk one more time, because Moshe says, I was taught the Torah b'chinam, I taught you the Torah b'chinam, and I did so because kasher tzivani, because that's the way God commanded me. Why did God command me to teach the Torah b'chinam? To teach you, to reveal to you that you too, when you pass on the Torah, you have to do so b'chinam. And therefore, the bottom line of this whole discussion is, Oral Torah Shebal Peh, says the Rambam, asur l'lamda b'schar. Which again leads us to the problem of the next paragraph in the Rambam, where the Rambam says that if the father doesn't find anyone who's willing to fulfill his obligation and teach his son Torah Shebal Peh b'chinam, then he's got to pay for it. Why? Because the pasuk says in Mishlei, emes knei. And then we have the problem, well, what about the malamed? How is he allowed to take money? And the Rambam doesn't address that. Maybe we'll use the Gemara Nedarim for that and say that he was getting schar batolo, schar shimur tinokos. By the way, the sugi of schar shchina of shimur tinokus is not necessarily relevant here because we might be talking about a young man who's 12 years old. I don't know. That's not really a tinok. I don't know. But anyway, I don't want to. I don't want to focus on that. Is it possible that this prohibition of receiving payment for teaching Torah Sheba'al Peh is limited to a case where the Torah that you're passing on was given to you Baal Peh? I'm sorry, was given to you Bechino. Do you follow what I'm saying? The Rambam is emphasizing that just like I taught you, Klal Yisrael, the Torah Bechinam, I didn't get paid for it, so too you will teach others Bechinam. But what would be in a scenario where you were taught Torah and you paid for it? Which is exactly what the Rambam addresses here in a case where he didn't find anyone who would be willing to teach Bechinam, and the Rambam obligates you to teach B'schar. Now, you went ahead and you paid for Torah Sheba'al Peh. You couldn't find anyone who was willing in all of, Clanton Park, all of Toronto, I don't know, maybe all of Ontario, all of Canada. You couldn't find one person to teach your son Torah gratis. So the Rambam paskins, you have to pay for Torah. Emes Knei. Now you paid for Torah, or alternatively, you paid for your son's Torah, whichever way. And now you or your son is now transmitting Torah to someone else. Does he have a right to say, I want to get paid for my Torah? Why? Because why do I have to teach Torah b'chinam? Says the Rambam, because ani limaditi oschem b'chinam. Let's read it again. Atem lamadatem b'chinam mimeni. Right, the Rambam emphasizes that you, Klal Yisrael, received the Torah gratis. V'chein kishetal to lamdu v'doros lamdu b'chinam k'moshel lamadatem mimeni. It's kind of like a tit for a tat, if you know what I mean. You receive the Torah b'chinam, says Moshe Rabbeinu, therefore you have to pass it on b'chinam. But what would be Lu Yitzur if somebody received the Torah and he had to pay for it? Maybe in that case he has a right to say, I want to cut my losses. I paid for the Torah. I purchased the Torah. Now I have a right to sell it and get money back for it. So take a look at the Rambam, who actually addresses this question. I thought this was crazy. But look at the Rambam. The Rambam says, Yachol, we know that the word Yachol means a havamina. Yachol yilamed lacherim b'schar. Right after the Rambam goes through this whole rigmarole that he couldn't find anybody, and therefore he had to pay someone to teach the son Torah. Now maybe the son, or again it could be the father as well, could now demand payment when he teaches the Torah, when he passes on the Torah. Yachol yilamed lacherim b'schar. Talmud Lomar v'al Timkar. Whoa. In that pasuk in Mishlei, it says Emes Knei v'al Timkar. Pay for it, for the Torah, but don't sell it for money. Rabbi said, do you see what's going on over here? The Rambam is entertaining a Havamina, and he rejects the Havamina only based on a drasha in the pasuk. Without this pasuk, he would say, well, look, I was taught Torah for money. I want to pass on the Torah for money. a tit for a tat. And therefore, the Rambam says, "Holamadatu." What do we derive from the pasuk of Al Timkar? Shal also lo lelamed b'schar, af al pi shel limdo rabo b'schar. Even though his teacher taught him b'schar, nevertheless, he's not allowed to teach someone else b'schar. But the Rambam needs a pasuk for that. So what was the Havamina here? That because I paid for Torah to receive the Torah, therefore I'm allowed to get paid for transmitting the Torah. So I'm going to suggest a pshat over here. Again, as I always say to you, you have to decide if you like it or you don't like it. The Rambam introduces the fact that Moshe says, I received the Torah b'china. Why not drop that? What do I lose if I would cross out that whole line that the Rambam added that Moshe says, well, I received the Torah b'china. Cross it out. All that the Rambam really needs is that Moshe Rabbeinu taught the Torah b'china. That's a fact of history. That's a reality. If I taught you the Torah b'china, then you have to teach others b'china. Re'ei limadati eschem, etc. No. The Rambam needs another element into the equation. He needs the fact that Hashem taught Moshe b'china. Why? So I want to suggest there's a rule in halacha that we derive conclusions from the way God gave the Torah. Like, for example, there's a Gemara in Megillah about how, Torah should be studied b'kol ram because Hashem gave the Torah b'kol ram. Or, for example, the halacha is that atah ho amodi modi, that you should stand when the Torah is read because Hashem, when He gave the Torah, we were standing. Again, that requires a whole study in itself. But let's just work with the following premise. The way the Torah was given will set up halacha l'doros for all generations about how we teach Torah. Now, it's critical that the Rambam adds and emphasizes that the Torah was given to Moshe b'china, because that tells you and defines the halach of Kabbalah Satorah. And the halacha is that ki Kabbalah so kach mesiras. In the same way that it was given, that's how we have to give it over. It was given to Moshe Rabbeinu b'china. We have to give it b'china. Why do I need that? Because the Rambam is saying, if I only had the fact that Moshe Rabbeinu gave us the Torah b'china, then in a case where somebody taught the Torah to us b'schar and we had to pay for it, then you can't derive any conclusions from the fact that Moshe Rabbeinu transmitted the Torah b'china. True, we received the Torah from Moshe Rabbeinu b'china, and therefore we have no right to demand schar when we pass on Moshe Rabbeinu's Torah. But if Lu Yitzur, in a situation, Ka'ai Gavna, that we received the Torah b'schar, we paid for it, then we can't learn anything from Moshe Rabbeinu. Moshe Rabbeinu is only going to tell us that you have to pass on the Torah the same way I passed on the Torah to you. But if somebody passes on the Torah to me and I have to pay the bill, then who says I can't pass on the Torah to someone else and demand that they pay the bill? I took a loss of 1,000. I want to get reimbursed. I want to cut my losses. So therefore, the Rambam wants to introduce another element to the equation that Hashem taught Moshe Rabbeinu the Torah b'chinam, and that's halacha of Kabbalah. There was a Kabbalah Torah b'chinam. And we learned many halachas from the way the Torah is transmitted, is given at Sinai. The way the Torah is given at Sinai, we have to imitate that when we pass and transmit on the Torah. So that's what I call kikabolasa kain mesirasa. Again, I'm inventing a new phrase here. But it's the concept, not the phrase. The Mesira has to be an imitation of the Kabbalah. No, but that be the case. So why do I need the fact that Moshe Rabbeinu taught the Torah b'chinam? Why don't I say that the reason why I have to teach Torah b'chinam is because I can't change the tzuras ha-mesira. I mean, Mesiras HaTorah was from Hashem to Moshe b'chinam. That wouldn't have been good enough. Because there is no tashlum ta'kodesh baruch Hu. You want to derive halacha from the way it was given X, then you have to assume it could have been given Y, right? The flip side of X. But in this case, there is no flip side of X. But after Moshe Rabbeinu says, Kasher tzivisani, Kasher tzivani Hashem, meaning that I passed it on to you because God demanded it. Now I understand that why did God demand it? Because that's the way Torah is transmitted. That's the Mesiras HaTorah. And therefore, the Rambam is going to say that even though under very extreme, unusual scenarios, you're allowed to get paid for teaching Torah, but that doesn't permit you to go ahead and teach Torah and get paid for it. Why? Because Hashem gave the Torah to Moshe Rabbeinu b'chinam and ki kabbalasa kach mesirasa. And if you'll tell me, well, Hashem couldn't have accepted schar anyway, so what's the concept of chinam? That's where we introduce kasher tzivani, that Moshe Rabbeinu got a tzivui from Hashem, that the way that Moshe Rabbeinu received the Torah, that's how he has to transmit the Torah. And that's where that's part of Allah. That's Oral Torah. And therefore, whenever we teach Torah, if we would get paid for teaching Torah, we're changing and altering the Mesira of the Torah. The Mesira of the Torah is a specific method, and it's got to be given in that surah, the way it was given to Klal Yisrael. So again, just to try to piece together what we know and then leave what we don't know as an unanswered question. But what we do know now is why the Rambam needs 3 elements in order to derive the conclusion that you're not allowed to teach Torah b'schar and get paid for it. What are the 3 elements? Number 1, to quote the language, Ani b'chinam lamadati. Moshe Rabbeinu first and foremost says that I studied the Torah and was given the Torah by Hashem b'chinam. Number 2, afatem lamadatim b'chinam imeni, which means that you Klal Yisrael receive the Torah from me b'chinam. And the 3rd element is that this is Lidoros, meaning that this is a hora, that this is the method and the way that Torah has to be taught for all generations, b'chinam. And how do I know that? You can't derive anything from Hashem giving the Torah b'chinam because there is no schar. It's not shay. You can't derive any conclusions from Moshe Rabbeinu that he taught the Torah b'chinam. Maybe that was Moshe's piety. But the kasher tzivani, and add that to the re'eh at the beginning of the pasuk, says the Rambam that Moshe Rabbeinu taught the Torah not because he was being pious about it, not because he was a chassid And he went Lifnei V'Shus Hadin. No, because Kasher Tzivani. Because Hashem says, look, I taught you the Torah B'chinam. That sets into, what's the word I want to use? A dfus. How do you say in English? It's a, come on, help me out here, guys. Well, how do you call it? Dfus.
Form.
A form. Yeah, I'm looking for a stronger word than a form. But anyway, there's a form. There's it's like
Form.
when you have
Imprint.
an imprint. Maybe that's a better word, an imprint. It's like, when your wife bakes cookies, she puts it, something on the dough, to give it a definite form. So Hashem says, Kasher Tzivani, meaning you, Moshe Rabbeinu, teach the Torah the way you receive the Torah. And that's not just a piety on the part of Moshe to teach the Torah to Klal Yisrael gratis. Now that I think about it, he could have made a good couple of bucks. Imagine if every Jew would have paid him, $100. I don't know, Canadian, or 100 shekel, maybe he's doing better, but every. So, multiply that by Shish and Ribu, Moshe Rabbeinu could have been a very rich man. Anyway, but leave that out. So what I'm saying is that Hashem commanded Moshe Rabbeinu, you transmit the Torah to Klal Yisrael the way that I transmitted the Torah to you, which means that there's a halacha of Mesiras HaTorah. So even if someone says, well, I received the Torah b'schar, I had to pay for it, and therefore I want to pass it on and get, cut my losses, he can't do so. Because that would be a violation of the Tzuras Mesiras HaTorah, the way that Kasher Tzivani, the way that it has to be given over. And that means that Hashem gave it over b'chinam, and that means that we have to imitate Hashem, and Moshe Rabbeinu does so, Kasher Tzivani, as I was commanded to, and I teach the Torah b'chinam. And if that's the Mesiras HaTorah, if that sets the imprint as to how Torah should be transmitted, there's no exception to the rule. And therefore, don't tell me that in monetary terms, I spent 1,000 in order to receive the Torah. I should get back my 1,000 when I teach the Torah. No, none of those cheshbonos will be acceptable, because this is the Mesiras HaTorah, and it's set in a form, in a dfus, in an imprint, and you can't violate it, you can't change it. That's the way the Torah has to be passed on. Just one second. The only thing that crosses my mind here is who's going to be teaching Torah to the masses? Just a technical question. I mean, if I would address every one of you, I don't know if there are any exceptions here. Maybe someone here is retired. I don't know. But let's say you weren't retired. Like in the shul in Ramat Beit Shemesh. Here in Har Nof, everyone's retired. I bring down the average age down. But if I go to Ramat Beit Shemesh, which I'm about to leave after we finish the Shia, everyone's working. Everyone's got an income. No one is on pension. So what am I going to do? I'm going to give up my work and my income to teach your son Torah? So I just a question that I want to raise here. If the Rambam is saying also Torah shval peh b'schar because you're violating and you're deviating from the Mesiras HaTorah the way it was given, and we have to follow the Mesiras HaTorah. That's very nice in an ideal world. If you're eating man min hashamayim, that's great. But if you have a salary, chas v'shalom, right? You're working. I remember the Dobi Gil shall work. If you're working, so then you don't have to give up your livelihood, your pas lechem, in order to teach Torah. Bechinam. So just one second. Before we go on, I know, Joe, you want to say something. I just wanted to see if I could clear my head about this. So basically what I'm asking now is really the question that we started with before. The Rambam says that lo matzah mishi alando b'china, everybody's working. He went through the entire town, his local shtetl, and everybody's got a job. No one's willing to give up their job to teach b'china. They can't afford it. Is then Yilami b'schar shenemar emes kneh. But then we have the question, okay, emes kneh, I understand you need the Torah. You have no one to teach you the Torah or your son. So therefore you're going to pay for it. But how's the Malamed allowed to take the Torah? So that's the question that we asked. So the system is going to operate with the fact that there are people who will get paid for teaching Torah Shebaal Peh. I seem to recall that somebody asked Rav Soloveitchik once, some smart aleck, do you get a salary from Yeshiva University? And he says, I do. But, he said, don't learn from me. Yeah, Joe, you want to say something?
No, I just wanted to add to that maybe you're not even Mekayim schar of limud Torah if you even learn it like that. Would you say?
If you're gonna teach it, or
if you're going to learn it, you mean
it becomes like a misabah bavera or something?
Yeah, right.
No, the bottom line is we have to assume that the guy who's teaching you and getting paid has a legal, halachic permission to do so. The question is how. Is the Rambam going to operate with the Gemara and the Dorim and the Schar Bittul and all that stuff? I don't know.
Why isn't the Rav bringing the chiddush that he said last week?
That what?
That you have this right to learn it for free, but I also have a right to get you to have some kind of to be able to
remuneration. I think is the fancy word.
Yeah. So and yours doesn't get.
Yeah, but again, Joe, here's the problem: if he gets paid, like you say, he has a right to get paid, but the Rambam says asur. I'm just reading the Rambam for the 15th time. Torah Shebaal Peh asur l'lamda b'schar. I mean, I can't rewrite the text of the Rambam.
Maybe you could say. I mean, Moshe did not need. He spent 40 days up in Shemayim. He didn't need any kind of nourishment. He didn't need anything. So in that situation, if we come to a point where we don't need anything, then we're like Moshe. Then obviously we don't have it. Maybe that's the concept.
Wait a minute, Joe, but Moshe, 40 days on the mountain, was not teaching Torah, as far as I know.
And he said he learned it for free, right?
Okay, he learned it for free, but why does that mean that I have to teach Torah for free? So we said that Moshe Kashat that God commanded him to teach Torah b'chino. When he gets down from the mountain and he has to pass on the Torah, don't get paid for it. That's why Hashem commanded it. And therefore, we have to imitate that whole series. Maybe it takes us back to HaKadosh Baruch Hu taught Moshe b'chino. And we're trying to figure out what gives permission to someone to say, well, I'm going to get paid for my teaching of Torah. So I'm going to think out loud here. We have to end in about 5 minutes. That maybe a person could transmit Torah shelo al yidei mesira. Meaning, Mesiras HaTorah is a concept. It's a legal entity, what we call a Chal Shem. It's not just, I'm teaching Torah. No. I'm involved in Mesiras HaTorah, but there's also Liman HaTorah. Meaning, you could teach Torah, but not be Moser Torah. So if you get paid for teaching Torah, then although you fulfill the mitzvah of teaching Torah, but you don't fulfill the special, unique mitzvah, the kiyum of Mesiras HaTorah. Because Mesiras HaTorah, by definition, has to be Ki Kabbalasa kach Mesirasa, Ma Kabbalasa b'chinam, af Mesirasa b'chinam. I'll give you an example of what I have in mind. What would be a case of teaching Torah without a Mesiras HaTorah? The Rambam has later on in Perek Daled a Talmud she'eno hagun. What's going on? You're talking about a student who wants to get admission into the yeshiva, but he's not worthy. He's mekulkal b'midos. How do you say that in English? He deviates from the right moral path. You know, in my mind, it would be a chain smoker, but that's not what the Rambam has in mind. So the Rambam says that you could teach him, according to one interpretation of the Rambam, but not in the Beis Medrash. And the Pashup shot is because once you give him entry into the Beis Medrash, he will influence the group. And he's a bad influence. He will bring down the whole yeshiva. But you want to teach him privately, teach him private. So I'm going to suggest, and maybe when we get to Perek Daled in about 20 years, we'll study this in depth, that when you teach privately someone who cannot enter into the Beis Medrash, that's Limud Torah without Mesiras HaTorah. Mesiras HaTorah has to be from the Rebbe to the next generation in the Beis Medrash, whoever gets admitted. Anyone who's outside the Beis Medrash, and we can't give him admission, all right, you want to teach him Torah on a private basis, but that's not Mesiras HaTorah. In such a case, would I be allowed to get paid for teaching a Talmud she'eno hagun outside the Beis Medrash? How are you allowed to get paid? But the answer is because the reason why you can't get paid is because you're deviating and violating the Mesiras HaTorah. But here I'm not interested in Mesiras HaTorah. Here I'm teaching outside the framework of Mesiras HaTorah. So it's pure Limud HaTorah. For Limud HaTorah per se, maybe I could say, well, look, you know what? Let's say I was taught Torah b'schar, I'm going to teach Torah b'schar. Because it's not a violation of Mesiras HaTorah. All right, a lot of food to think about. And since we can't think about food tomorrow, so we might as well think about the sugya that we're learning. So let me wish you all a meaningful fast. And I'm assuming that Hashem will be moichel me for teaching Torah on Erev Tisha B'Av and enjoying it too much. But we should be zochem Yitzhak Hashem to the Gula Shleim. Hashem should protect us. I don't know if any of you get my Dvar Torah that I give out, short video, 3-4 minutes every week on the parsha, and I speak about how much we need Hashem to protect us, and that should be the Nechama. We have Tu B'Av coming up, we have Shiva Nechemta, and Mitzvah Hashem will have a good year of Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur, a year of good things for Klal Yisrael. I think in Canada we need it just as much, if not more, than we need it here. I don't know. It's
more.
It's not a normal situation. You know, so we need Hashem. So let's work on Tisha B'Av to try to get Hashem to show us, grace and protect us and bring about the Gula Shleima of Mary's Amen. Thank you so much.
Amen.